This is the history of protest songs in the United States. Part 2: The 19th Century. 19th century protest songs dealt, for the most part, with three key issues: war, and the Civil War in particular, such as When Johnny Comes Marching Home, the abolition of slavery, Song of the Abolitionist, No More Auction Block for Me, O Freedom, and Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, among others, and women's suffrage, both for and against in both Britain and the U.S. Hutchinson family singers were one of the protest voices in America at the time. From 1839, the Hutchinson family singers became well known for their songs supporting abolition. They sang at the White House for President John Tyler and befriended Abraham Lincoln. Their subject matter touched on relevant social issues such as abolition, the temperance movement, politics, war, and women's suffrage. Much of their music focused on idealism, social reform, equal rights, moral improvement, community activism, and patriotism. The Hutchinsons' careers spanned the major social and political events of the mid-19th century, including the Civil War. The Hutchinson family singers established an impressive musical legacy and are considered to be the forerunners of the great protest singer-songwriters and folk groups of the 1950s and 60s, such as Woody Guthrie and Bob Dylan. Many Negro spirituals have been interpreted as thinly veiled expressions of protest against slavery and oppression. For example, "Oh Freedom" and "Go Down Moses" draw implicit comparisons between the plight of enslaved African Americans and that of enslaved Hebrews in the Bible. These spiritual songs antedated the Civil War but were collected and widely disseminated only after the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution in 1865. The first collection of African American spirituals appeared in Thomas Wentworth Higginson's book Army Life in a Black Regiment, which was published in 1870, but collected in 1862-64 while Higginson was serving as a colonel of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, the first regiment recruited from former slaves for the federal service. Secretary of War Edwin McMaster Stanton required that black regiments be commanded by white officers. A fervent abolitionist, transcendentalist critic, and poetry lover, who was a friend and enthusiastic champion of American poet Emily Dickinson, Higginson had been deeply impressed by the beauty of the devotional songs he heard the soldiers singing around the regiment's campfires. Higginson wrote down the texts in dialect as he heard them, but failed to provide tunes. The second influential book about African American spirituals was the 1872 collection Jubilee Songs as Sung by the Jubilee Singers of Fisk University, by Thomas F. Stewart, comprising songs sung by students of Fisk University on their fundraising tours throughout the county, arranged and harmonized according to 19th century classical music conventions. One of the known African American spirituals is the anthem, "Lift Every Voice and Sing," originally written as a poem by African American novelist and composer James Weldon Johnson, born 1871, died 1938. It was set to music in 1900 by his brother John Rosamond Johnson, born 1873, died 1954, in 1900 and first performed in Jacksonville, Florida as part of a celebration of Lincoln's birthday on February 12, 1900 by a choir of 500 schoolchildren at the segregated Stanton School, where James Weldon Johnson was principal. In 1919, the NAACP adopted the song as the Negro National Anthem, This song contains strong appeals to the ideals of justice and equality, and singing it could be interpreted as an act of grassroots self-assertion by people who were officially still barred from speaking out too overtly against Jim Crow and the resurgence of Ku Klux Klan activity in the 1920s. A topical parlor song that is arguably a precursor of environmental movements is an 1837 musical setting of "Woodman, spare that tree." The text is from a poem by George Pope Morris, founder of the New York Mirror, and published in that paper, set to music composed by British-born composer Henry Russell. Verses include, "That old familiar tree, whose glory and renown are spread o'er land and sea, and wouldst thou hack it down? Woodman, forbear thy stroke! Cut not its earth-bound ties. Oh, spare that aged oak, now towering to the skies." This song has never caught on as a movement song, however.